Muscle fatigue is a problem that we do have to deal with when we're talking about the muscular system. And muscle fatigue specifically is going to be the tiring of a working muscle. Now, that is going to be when the muscle fails to contract. Even though it's being stimulated, it's not really causing that contraction to take place. The reasons for this are not completely understood, but it's possibly due to ion imbalances, that calcium and the potassium, and also problems with the neuromuscular junction. This likely involves an oxygen deficit, and when we do have oxygen deficits, that's going to make it harder to generate the ATP that is going to be needed, because without oxygen, we're not going to be able to run that cellular respiration, which was the very efficient process for making ATP. When this happens, this means that we're going to have lactic acid accumulation. The ATP is going down, that supply is going down because, again, we can't run the cellular respiration that's so dependent on oxygen, and ionic balances are going to occur. If we talk about types of muscle contractions, these do fall into two main categories. We have isotonic contractions, and then we also have isometric contractions. And here's a description in this image here. We have the isotonic, where you actually see a lot of movement taking place there. In this case, we're curling a ball up, so we're using the arm to do that. With isotonic contractions, we actually see an overall shortening of the muscle, and as the muscle shortens, that's when we're going to see the movement taking place. When we're looking at the isometric contractions, the muscles are not actually going to shorten, and we're not going to see a lot of movement, quite honestly. Instead, we're going to see the muscles get distorted in their overall appearance. You might get like a bulge in the muscle. So the muscles, we say that they kind of spin, and this is going to be what we get when we try to move something that's pretty immovable. The picture here represents a man trying to pull on a fixed bar, and he's not able to really move that. Now, we do have different types of exercises that use the isotonic contractions and other ones that use the isometric contractions. Muscle tone, when we use that term and we refer to muscle tone, that is really referring to a state of continuous partial contractions. And those continuous partial contractions, those are going to be involuntary contractions that take place. We do have certain effects that exercise exerts on the muscular system. Regular exercise has the capability to increase muscle size, it can increase muscle strength, and it can also increase the endurance. And this all depends on the type of exercise that we're doing as far as which one of these things is going to be most effective. When we talk about aerobic exercise includes activities such as running, maybe biking, cycling, swimming. This is going to result in stronger, more flexible muscles, and those muscles are going to have more resistance to the overall fatigue. What we're not going to see is this big development of bulging muscles when we're talking about aerobic exercise. We do get an overall increase in the blood supply to the muscles. And if we have an increase in blood supply to the muscles, then we probably have an increased oxygen supply to the muscles. The body's metabolism is overall going to be much more efficient when we do complete a lot of aerobic exercise. And the heart overall is going to enlarge. And that enlarged heart is going to be what we call hypertrophy. Again, when we're talking about aerobic exercise, this is not the type of exercise that we want to do if we're just trying to develop those bulging muscles, because this exercise does not increase the muscle size very much. The second type of exercise is resistance exercise. And with resistance exercise, that is things like weightlifting or doing push-ups. And this is going to result in larger muscle cells, and those larger muscle cells will give us larger muscles overall. So this is going to pit muscles against some type of immovable object or almost immovable object. Obviously, the bar that the weightlifter is lifting, it is movable, but it's something that's very hard to actually move. So it doesn't mean that it's going to be completely immovable. A combination of these two types of exercise, aerobic with resistance exercise, is really going to be the ideal type of exercise to use in any type of exercise program. With the skeletal muscle activity, we do distinguish 5 golden rules that we like to talk about. The first of those 5 golden rules is going to be, with few exceptions, the skeletal muscles are going to cross at least one body joint. So we can see that right here. We have this joint right here. So I'm just going to circle the joint here, and you can see that this muscle, it does extend across that particular joint. Another golden rule is that the bulk of a skeletal muscle is going to lie proximal to the joint that's crossed. So we can see that happening right here. So we have the bulk of the muscle on the side that's closest to the overall body mass. All skeletal muscles are also going to have at least 2 attachments. So they will be attached essentially on the 2 ends. They are going to have an origin, and then they're also going to have an insertion. Skeletal muscles are really only capable of pulling. They're not going to be pushing things. And when we do have contraction, the skeletal muscle insertion is going to move towards the origin. So that's the moving up of the arm that you see being illustrated in the image right here. If we look at this image here, and we're going to have a few other slides as well, this is just giving us an overview of the common types of body movement and some of the names that go along with that. You can see a few different examples of flexion right here. We also have extension. We can have hyperextension, where we're going to move even further. Here you can see even more examples of those 3 types, the hyperextension, extension, and flexion. We have rotation is very possible, so we can clearly see that with the head when we rotate it from side to side. We can also move other muscles and rotate. Here's just a few other ones. There's all different types of body movements that our muscles are going to be able to produce, and the way that they're able to produce these different movements is that we will have multiple muscles kind of working together. Some of them are actually kind of working against each other, so counteracting each other, so that we can get the variety of movements that you're seeing here on these slides. If we talk about interactions of skeletal muscles in the body, first off, individual muscles can only pull and contract. There's absolutely not going to be any pushing involved. However, the muscle cells can definitely work together with each other, and if they're working together and in opposition, then this is going to be able to produce a wide variety of movements, and we did see a lot of those common movements in the previous slides. When we do have muscles working together, we have a few different terms that we use to describe their particular role in that activity. The prime mover is going to be the muscle that has the primary or major responsibility. The antagonist is going to be muscles that oppose or reverse the movement. Synergists will be helpers. So synergists are going to be working together with the prime movers, and they will be producing really the same movement, or they might be reducing unwanted movement. And then the fixators, these will be specialized synergists, and their job is going to be to hold a bone still or to stabilize the origin. So all of these will be working together to produce a specific movement, and we can get a lot more variety with our movements when we do have more collections of muscles that are actually working together. Here we have just a few examples of where we would have multiple muscles working together to move some body limbs. So here we can see some pec muscles that are involved in actually moving the arm. Here we have a few other muscles that are working together to produce arm movements. So we can have arm movements in all different types of directions because we do have a lot of muscles that are working with that. Those are muscles in our chest and then also muscles in our upper arm or in the shoulder that help us to produce those varieties of movement. If we get into the actual naming of the skeletal muscles, muscles are going to be named according to several features. One thing is that they are named according to the overall direction of the muscle fibers. They are named according to the relative size of the muscle. We can talk about the location of the muscle, the number of origins that are there, in some cases the location of the muscle's origin and then also its insertion. And we can also talk about the shape of the muscle. That can certainly be something that is included in the name. And then lastly, the overall action of the muscle would contribute to the overall name that we do end up coming up with. Now, if we talk about the arrangement of the fascicles that make up the muscles, the arrangements are quite variable. You can see how they're named. On this slide, we've got 7 different types of fascicles that can be formed. it affects the shape of the muscle, and then it affects the range of movements and the range of motion and power that that particular muscle is going to be able to perform. Here we're just taking a quick look at some of the muscles that we do have in the body. There are really tons of muscles there, so we're not going to individually talk about each one. But here we have a look at the head. We have lots of muscles associated with our skull. You can see that some of them are laying right over top of the skull. Some of them are going to be facial muscles that would be responsible for a lot of those facial expressions that we do have. Here we have a look at some other muscles. So these would be chest muscles. So you can see again that there is a whole list of them there. Another thing to notice is that we have layers to the muscles. So you can see in this image here, we're showing 3 layers. You've got one here, and one here. So 3 layers of muscle on top of each other. So here would be a look at some of the muscles on the back. Again, a lot of variety here. We have a lot of muscles that are going to ultimately be working together with each other, and really it's muscles layered on top of each other. Some are much bigger than others, and there's certainly a lot of different shapes. The deltoid muscle, just to point that one out, that one's up here. That is going to be a common place where people do get shots when we're talking about intramuscular shots. Here would be a look at some of the leg muscles. This, you can see another area where we do tend to get different intramuscular shots. You can see some examples of where we do use sizes to go into the naming of specific muscles. So that's the maximus part that we do see in there. Closer look at the leg. Here we're looking at the front of the leg, and again indicating some places where we could get some intramuscular injections. The back of the leg, lots of muscles that are going to be working together there for that particular limb. And then last one here, we have a kind of big overview of muscles that we do have in the human body. By no means are we talking and looking at all the muscles in this picture. Muscles are buried beneath these. We showed that you have multiple layers of muscles, and there are really tons of muscles that make up the body, hundreds. So that's the front view. This would be a look at the back of the human body and just the vast diversity of the muscles that you do have in the body. If we just hit on a few key developmental aspects of the muscular system, the muscular system is initially laid down as segments in the embryo. So this is something that happens very early during development. Those segments are going to be invaded by nerves once they have been laid down, and then that is going to later control the muscles, and that muscle control is something that is refined all throughout childhood. So you've probably seen before that babies, infants, they have very jerky movements, but as they get older, and certainly we're talking about more than just getting 1 or 2 years old, throughout all of childhood, those individual movements get more and more refined, and we get more control of those fine motor skills.